Now, that's going to be a very different God and a very different Jesus to the one that many people think they will meet one day. It's the time when God and his Son boil over in anger at what people have done to this beautiful world that they made. That's really what we're talking about. And that anger results in a whole lot of disasters, which we're going to look at now, one after the other, that are released when Jesus breaks the seals on the scroll. We are now into a period of very great trouble. It is called here the big trouble, or the great tribulation. That's the phrase. I call it the big trouble, capital B, capital T. A time of distress worse than anything the world has yet seen. Now, many of these troubles are not difficult to understand. Let's look at them. There are 3 series of 7 troubles called seals, trumpets, and bowls. Now, when you look at the meaning of all these 21 things, it's not hard to understand them. In fact, they've become entirely credible in our day. Very easy to understand these things happening. But when you add them together, it's a lot of trouble. It's one trouble after another. Well, we're in the middle section of Revelation, which is bad news. Things will get much worse before they get better. So we have wars and famines and earthquakes and hailstorms and polluted rivers and oceans and diseases killing a third of mankind. Well, do you find all that difficult to believe? I don't. It's entirely credible now. Now, the problem is to discover the order of these events. But let's just go through the events themselves before we go any further. Last time I did introduce you to the first 4 seals, which come to us in the form of 4 horses of different colors. A white horse, a red horse, a black horse, and a green horse, which those colors have always been symbols of military aggression. Conquerors usually ride on white horses. Napoleon did for one. A red horse symbolizes bloodshed, a black horse famine, because that's the color human flesh goes under malnutrition, and the green horse disease, which usually follows famine when the physical resistance is low. Now that's a series of 4 things which you can see in local situations in many parts of the world. Aggression, then bloodshed, then famine, then disease. And we can see them in Angola, in Sudan, in Bosnia. You can see them in many parts of the world, but here we're seeing them on a worldwide scale, not just in local countries, but on a worldwide scale, a greater scale than before. Number 5 and number 6 are quite different from the first 4. Number 5 begins to talk about the troubles that God's people will have in addition to the general troubles there will be for everybody. In other words, God's people will suffer more than others because they will suffer the general natural disasters as well as being a kind of scapegoat for those disasters. People have to find someone to blame, and God's people are going to be hit worse than others. But then that has always been the case. God's people suffer more than other people. We suffer from the normal things that go wrong in this world. We also suffer because we don't belong to this world. So God's people have a double portion of suffering. It is normal for God's people to suffer, but it will be worse at the end. So here we have number 5, seal number 5, persecution of Christians and the believer's prayer to God. How long? How much longer is this going on? Then in number 6, we go back to the world of unbelievers And we have huge earthquakes and terror from those earthquakes. Now, I've never been in an earthquake. I was once at the top of a skyscraper in Seattle, in America, when there was a tremor. And I thought at first it was me going faint, but then I realized the whole building was swaying. But it wasn't too bad. But people who've been in a bad earthquake tell me the most terrifying part of it is that there's nothing to hold on to, because there's nothing stable. The whole world is shaking. Now that's seal number 6. And then number 7 is quite a surprising one. Silence in heaven for half an hour. That is so surprising that it tells you that heaven's quite a noisy place. Well, we know it's a very musical place. There are lots of singing there. But all 7 seals are greeted with total silence in heaven for half an hour. And that's probably unheard of in heaven. So those are the 7 seals. And I want you to notice something about this. The first 4 belong together. The next 2, 5 and 6, are different from the first 4. And the 7th is totally different from the other 6. In other words, there's a series of 4, 2, and 1. Do you follow me? We'll find that is a common pattern all the way through to the end of the book of Revelation. A series of 7 is always composed of 4 and 2 and 1. So the first 4 belong together in a pattern, then the next 2 go together, and the final one stands on its own. And we notice that in the seals, 5, 6, and 7 are described as woes. Now that word woe is a curse. It's a word we should never use. I tremble when I hear a parent say to a little child, "Woe betide you if you do that again." We should be very careful in our use of words. Woe is the opposite of blessed. And Jesus uttered as many woes as he uttered blessed. Did you notice that? For example, in Luke's version of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Blessed are you poor, woe to you rich. Blessed are you who mourn, woe to you who laugh." Blessed, woe, blessed, woe. And Jesus once said to 5 large cities, "Woe to you, Capernaum. Woe to you, Bethsaida. Woe to you, Chorazin." And if you go to Galilee today, where all those cities were, you'll find they've all gone. And there's not a trace of them left, just a few ruins. But there was one city on the shore of Galilee that Jesus did not say woe to, and that's the city of Tiberias. And that's where you will stay if you go to Israel, because it's the only city still standing. There were 250,000 people living around Galilee in Jesus' day, and modern tourists get there and say, "Oh, isn't it beautiful and peaceful? I'm not surprised Jesus loved this." But there were 250,000 people living there in 5 cities. But Jesus said, "Woe to you, because you didn't believe the miracles I did in your streets." And when Jesus says woe, that's a curse. And every city Jesus said woe to has disappeared. The only city he didn't say woe to is still there. That's why you must notice this word woe when it occurs. It's a very serious word. And the last 3 seals are called woes. We're going to see that the last 3 trumpets are called woes, and the last 3 bowls are called woes, meaning that the last 3 in each series are much worse than the first 4. Do you follow me? There's the element of cursing coming in to the climax of each of the 7 series. Let's therefore look at the 7 trumpets. 1, 2, 3, and 4 again go together. They are all concerned with the environment, with what we call ecology now. A scorched earth a dust